Okay, this is a video about disassembling and reassembling a Dirt Devil Power Duo vacuum cleaner. You might want to do this either to replace some parts like the belt or to clean it if it's not performing adequately. This is specifically for the model UD20125B, which I believe is a 2018 model. But I think that many of the other Dirt Devil vacuum cleaners have a similar structure. So this might be helpful if you have something like this one, if not the exact same one. Okay, the first step, in this particular case, I separated the body from the base. You don't necessarily have to do that if you're changing the belt, but in this particular video, I'm replacing or I'm disassembling it entirely. There are some tricks that if you don't know about, they can kind of cause you to spend some time. So I'm going to highlight those things as I describe the disassembly. The first step is to remove these caps that are on either side of the base, and that'll release the upper part, what I call the body, from the base. And you do that by removing 2 screws on each cap, and these are snapped in, so you might need to gently pry them off. Don't kind of force them. They will pop off. Wiggling the body back and forth is helpful to releasing these things, but they do come off. And then once you've removed those little caps, the retainers, you can remove the body from the base. You have to carefully slide off the belt, off the motor shaft, and disconnect the hose that goes to the base. And you may want to also remove what they call the dirt cup. It's a canister that catches the dirt. And you also might want to remove this exhaust filter. There's some foam inside here that you can wash and to remove any sort of dust that's accumulated inside there. Okay, so once you put the base aside, laid the body down, front side down, and once again, removing the canister makes it a lot more stable. Otherwise, it kind of rocks back and forth on the canister. Then go and remove the screws that are indicated here. You don't have to remove that screw there. And once you've removed those screws, the motor compartment opens kind of this clamshell fashion. And you'll see the motor and also the vacuum. So it'll look like this. And that part of the motor cover comes apart completely, and you can set that aside. And you can easily remove the motor with the vacuum out of that compartment as well. If, for example, your vacuum is not starting at all, it's very likely that this electrical fuse is blown, so you do have to remove the motor and the vacuum in order to access that fuse. This is a close-up of that fuse. You can either replace just the fuse, but this entire thing here comes as an assembly. I think you can still get it online. If not, then it's a 15 amp fuse. I'm almost certain. You should check the printing on the fuse to make sure that you put in the right size fuse. Okay, the motor itself has a thermal fuse. There's this sleeve and the thermal fuse. I didn't take this apart, so I didn't really see the thermal fuse, but it's packaged inside this thing. In case the motor gets too hot, the thermal fuse melts and essentially breaks the circuit. In order to get the motor to run again, you need to replace that thermal fuse with an appropriate thermal fuse. Once again, I didn't open this, so I don't know what temperature rating, at what temperature the thermal fuse will melt, but be sure to replace it with the same temperature fuse. The temperature is written on the fuse. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the airflow path, partly because I was kind of curious about the airflow. It didn't seem very obvious from looking at the vacuum how the air flows through it. And it's also helpful to know about the airflow in case there might be some sort of blockage. So you can trace through the vacuum and check all the different ways, that pathways to clear them. So this is the vacuum pump. It's a clever little device. There's a spinning vane turbine type thing that draws air into this hole. This rubber, there are vanes in there. This rubber gasket separates the motor compartment into two parts so that it draws air in, pushes it across to the motor side and out this exhaust vent. This is another view of it with the vacuum in there. So there's one side where the vacuum draws air in, creates a low pressure here, and it shoots it out onto the other side, onto the motor, and then eventually out the exhaust vent. That being the exhaust vent there. So it comes in this round port, goes through this vent, through the vacuum, through the motor, across the motor, and out this exhaust vent. Okay, so now we're going to kind of trace backwards and see what the flow is through this vacuum cleaner. So far we know that the air kind of comes through here. We're going to now find out where the air comes from to go into here. Okay, in order to understand that, we need to look at both halves of the body. This round port connects to this round port here, and this round port is the bottom of a duct that connects to this round thing up there. Okay, so we're going to call those, this is round port number 1, round port number 2, and round port number 3. So round port number 2 and 3 are connected by this duct that's molded into the body. So far we have the air flows down through here, into there, through the vacuum, and out the exhaust. Okay, and this slide just repeats what I just described. The air flows down through there. Okay, so what connects to this round port? It's actually the canister. This rubber gasket seals onto that round port there. So as the vacuum is pulling air in through here, it's pulling air out of the canister. They call it, I guess, Dirt Devil calls it the dirt bin. All right, and this is once again a summary. We have air coming out of the canister, being sucked out of the canister into that port, down to this lower port, which connects to that port. This is the same port, kind of a close-up. that's drawn in by the vacuum into the motor housing, then across the motor and out this vent, which is kind of underneath the motor. All right, so as air is drawn out of the canister, more air is drawn in through this rectangular port, and so debris and air come in here, but only air comes out here, maybe just a little bit of dust, but it's largely air. And so the question is, how does that separation happen? And to see that, we need to open the canister. To open the canister is actually pretty easy. Locate, in fact, this instruction thing, right above it is a little tab, and gently slide it to the right. So it's normally to the left, slide it over to the right like that. And the top comes off the canister. Inside the canister is this filter, which is obviously the way that the debris gets separated from the air that comes out of that port there. And this filter sits inside this space here, which has these vanes. So initially, a lot of the large debris is kept out of the filter by these vanes. And also the vanes cause the air to circulate rather rapidly. So there's this centripetal effect on the large debris, so it never gets drawn into the filter. But the smaller stuff that makes it into here is caught by the filter. And that filter itself is more than just this foam thing. If you twist to remove it, you discover that there's this foam filter and then a paper filter. So this kind of like this double filtering going on. So very, very little dust. Actually, it has to be quite very, very small for it to finally make it into the airflow that's going to the vacuum pump. Typically, if your vacuum is not performing well, it's likely that these two filters are covered in dust and preventing airflow from easily flowing through, which then causes the motor to work really much harder than it should. Also, it causes the motor to heat up, largely because it's working harder, and it's not getting all the airflow that it normally gets to cool off. Okay, so I'm not sure why we have two of these, but okay. Okay, so once you reassemble everything and put the cover back on, put it on by putting the tab here, sliding it over to the left. We're going to follow the airflow path some more because we know how it gets out of the canister, but we don't know what's feeding this guy here. And it turns out it's not the most, well, it's not entirely obvious how the airflow getting to this point occurs. Okay, so once again, to understand this, we need to look at the other portion of the vacuum. And on the body, once again, there's a rectangular port with a gasket that mates with this rectangular port when the canister is on here. And there's another molded duct here that leads to this hose. So we finally reached a hose, and so the air and the debris comes in the hose up this duct through this rectangular port into here. The debris is trapped by the filtering, and the air then makes its way on, continues on to the vacuum pump through this round port. And this hose is attached to the wand. So the air flows through the wand, through the handle, through the hose, up through this molded duct, up this mold. This is the molded duct, and it comes out this square hole and goes into the canister. Now the question is, well, if you were to vacuum just with the wand, that's perfectly fine. You can see how the air flows. But the question is, if you're using the vacuum to, for example, do a rug where you're using the base, the brush, rotating brushes on the base, how does it get its airflow? So we're going to talk about that next. Okay, the way it gets its airflow is you insert the wand back into its holder, and the holder turns out to be yet another duct that then leads to this hose that feeds to the base. So kind of an insight that might not be entirely obvious immediately looking at this vacuum, but no matter whether you're vacuuming with the wand or if you're using the base, for example, to do a rug, all the debris, air and debris, goes through the handle and through the wand and through the handle. So it's kind of like a single pathway. If you pull the wand out, then simply the air starts at the tip of the wand and nothing goes through here. This is different from a lot of vacuum designs that have, in particular, to use the wand, you need to take the wand hose and plug it into someplace on the base. Okay, so that's it. So that, and it's helpful to know about this airflow in case the vacuum still doesn't work after you clean the filter. All right, now we're going to talk about disassembling the base. This is typically what users or owners of this vacuum will do, because if the belt breaks or gets worn, you need to replace it. You don't have to take the body off the base like I did earlier. You can simply just remove these covers, and the belt is under this portion of the covers. Getting these covers off is not exactly trivial, so I'm going to talk about the tricks for doing that. The problem is that there's kind of a chicken and egg problem here. There's two parts. There's the brush cover, and then there's the roller assembly. The roller assembly is held in place by these little pivot points and this tab that's hooked underneath the brush cover. But the problem is the brush cover, you can't just immediately remove it because the belt cover is under the roller assembly. So the roller assembly can't be flipped out here because it's caught under the brush cover, and the brush cover can't be removed because it's caught underneath the roller assembly. So how do you get them apart? And here's the trick. First, make sure you've removed all your screws. So both the roller assembly and the brush cover can be lifted a little bit, not a whole lot, at most a couple of millimeters. Okay, so lift them up a little bit. And then using, for example, I use this metal spatula to kind of help the tab kind of clear the brush cover. Don't force it, it'll come out. You kind of just have to jiggle it and use this as a guide for the tab to finally make its way out. And then once it gets out, there's our tab. You can flip this roller assembly all the way back. And then once the roller assembly is kind of free to flip back and forth, you can align the tabs with these slots. There's one on each side here, and you can just lift the roller assembly out. And once you have the roller assembly out, so you notice it's no longer in there. Those are the two slots that it goes into. The cover is now not held in, or kind of being held in place by the roller assembly. But it's still not straightforward because there are 3 tabs that connect the brush cover to this red housing, and they're pretty snugly joined. So once again, use a metal spatula to separate the red housing from the black brush cover, and you'll hear a little pop, pop, pop when they come out. And then once you've removed those tabs, in fact, here's the little holes for the tabs. Actually, that's not right. The tabs are on the red, and we'll have an image of them in a few slides. In any case, this is the belt. This is the brush roller. So this just lifts out. You can take it out, clean the brushes. A lot of times there are things like string or something caught in the brushes. It's a lot easier to untangle that stuff when the brushes are out of the base. And also, if you need to replace the belt, you'll need to lift up the brush roller and tuck the belt around this round pulley type thing. Okay, so here's the base fully disassembled. I didn't take this clear part out. I think there's like 1 screw. If you take 1 screw out, you can take the clear thing out and can disconnect this hose. I didn't really feel it was necessary to be able to clean this. Okay. And this is the roller assembly. This is the brush cover. The belt runs inside here. This is the brush roller. It just drops into these 2 locations here in this clear part, and you have to put the belt on before you do that. Okay, so here to reassemble is pretty much the reverse. You put the belt on the brush roller, drop the brush roller in, and normally at this point you'd also you'd put the belt on the motor. The motor shaft is kind of like right here. You need to do that before you put the brush cover on, because the brush cover also has a belt cover, and once you put the belt cover on, you're not going to be able to access the belt. So you have to put the belt on at this point, and now put the brush cover on. And here are the 3 tabs I was talking about. 1, 2, 3, and they go into these 3 holes, and you kind of have to make sure that they kind of click in. If they don't, you'll see kind of a gap between the brush cover and the red housing. If you do see it, kind of just patiently kind of wiggle the brush cover until you'll hear a little pop, pop, pop when they go back in. Okay, now once the brush cover is on, put the roller assembly, slide the tabs into their slots, and then the roller assembly rotates. And now the trick is to get this tab back under the brush cover, and it's kind of the reverse of getting it out. It'll go in fairly easily. It'll go in more easily than it did coming out. But if you need to use a metal spatula to guide it in. And then once you have the roller assembly back in its place, just put the screws back in. Actually, this is not there's no screw here. I think there's 5 screws here and 1 there. Oddly, the manual says there's only 5 screws. There's actually 6. And then once you have the base assembled, set the body back on the base, put put these pivots into sort of their little recesses. And a little tricky, before you set this down completely and put the belt on the shaft, then after you have it sitting in its recess, kind of work the belt over so it's kind of centered on the in its kind of channel here. Otherwise, I think it'll probably center itself, but if it's not centered, the belt's going to rub on the side here and kind of cause the belt to wear a bit before it gets centered. But my advice is to just center the belt now. Assume it's going to center itself. And then you put these little caps back on, put the screws in, reattach the hose, and put the canister back on, the exhaust filter back on if you'd remove them, and you're all done.